Well, when I look at the top industry challenges Greif faces right now and how Greif has responded, I think the challenge for 2009, like most companies, was to cut back, to hunker down. We froze our salaries. We eliminated our 401k match. We reduced our manning by 20%. We closed non-performing assets. We mothballed other assets. And we took the actions that we needed to take to push cost out, which we did a great job of, to lower our costs kind of commensurate with the levels of business that we had, which were, at times off 20 to 30 and even 40% in early 2009. And so we now are very cautiously entering a growth mode again. Have made some recent acquisitions, but managed growth, considering the cost reductions that we made, and assembling kind of a new emerging Greif that was similar to the one in 2008 before the catastrophe hit, and really kind of get us back on track with the growth pattern that we were in, and moving forward. As we integrate new businesses coming in, such as the Hanel acquisition, we'll be looking at, what are the possible synergies there for supply chain? Do we source through the same vendors? Are there some opportunities there to leverage the spend? Are there opportunities to standardize SKUs and have fewer offerings, therefore able to have less inventory and run more efficiently? Highest priority, hang on to the good work that we did in 2009 and really kind of hold the fort. Globally, we're really looking at expanding our global reach, not only in supply chain, but also in the sourcing arena, to make us more of a effective global organization than I think we've been. So that would be our top priorities right now. Well, when we look at strategic outsourcing and what kind of a role that has played in our strategic plan and in our business, clearly the largest spends that we have in the world on a combined basis are North America. Actually, back when I was running North America, Don Hummel, our CFO, was really the one that set out, along with Bill Sparks, our president at the time, to try to start capturing some of this non-core spend. And when we talk about non-core, what we say is indirect. Direct materials is more in the limelight of the commodities that we buy, such as steel, resin, paper. But there really isn't any opportunity to improve margin there and take the good work that we've done to leverage our spend. It, in many instances and ways, gets passed back and through to our customers. The non-core spend, which we categorize as transportation logistics, which tends to be a little bit more core, but not quite as visible. And then most definitely what we would consider the key indirects. It could go from consulting contracts to accounting contracts to machinery, equipment, and bearing supplies, to uniforms, to temporary labor. Lots of smaller spends, many categories. But the opportunity to reduce those spends typically is money that Greif can take to the bank. As we looked at the staffing that we had at the time and the organization that we had at the time, we had no global sourcing and supply chain group, so everything was done regionally through purchasing groups that actually kind of reported up, through the business. Don and Bill, especially driven by Don, decided outsourcing really was going to produce a much quicker payback and a higher payback than trying to staff up ourselves in that arena. So when I look at the tools and the people that ICG bring to the table, and the ability to accelerate that capture of the non-core spend in logistics, this seems like a much better way, a much more advantageous way to go than to try to build these systems ourselves. We have people right now that do very good jobs, that did very good jobs of sourcing steel when they sourced it on their own. But we've been able to leverage that by having an overview, and I think ICG can leverage our spends in these countries by having an overview and dealing with other companies and having a much bigger database and a dedicated group. So when you say, we're outsourcing, yes, we are outsourcing, but at the same time, we consider these people to be a part of our team just as if we hired them ourselves, but we didn't have to train them. And they came with some intellectual capital and kind of tribal knowledge that they brought to the table that we would have had to start from scratch. So when I started looking at the non-core spends and looking at the resources at ICG, I think we reached an inflection point that really said, if we want to do this, we can do it really all at once, or we can go out and build it. It's going to take years. And I really kind of compare it to the acquisition that Greif made of Van Leer back in 2001, which is, we ended up with a company that has operations in 45 countries. We ended up with a company that knows the ways and mores of those countries and how to operate, speaks the languages, understands how business is conducted. You can't go out and buy that. If you went out to build that today, it would take, past my lifetime to build it. And I'm not sure you still would have the successful company that we have. Well, when you ask about specific success stories with ICG Commerce, I would have to say, really not kiddingly, there's too many to mention. I mean, we've had a lot of successes with ICG Commerce. Some of the most memorable, really, I would say, one was several years ago when they first started. We source two types of fuel for our major paper mill down in Riverville, Virginia. And one is number 6 fuel oil, and then the other is natural gas. We had never been able to negotiate any type of a value proposition for fuel oil. And with the help of ICG, got a major reduction. I would say that was probably the first big win that we had. Another really, high-level success was with our audit function here at corporate, and they got involved and just did a terrific job and very professionally handled that with a company that we still retain today. Was a win-win for us from the perspective we got to keep the audit firm that was the one of choice, but at much lower rates, and that actually applied globally. So that turned out to be really a global win. They also, more recently, helped negotiate a very advantageous temporary labor contract over in Europe. So that would be just 3 key ones off the cuff. We use kind of a 3-to-1 ratio of figuring that normally for every $1 that ends up being spent to get the services of ICG Commerce, we typically see 3, at least 3, in return. That's not a bad deal. If I spent $1 million and somebody gave me $3 million, I'd feel pretty good about that. I would like that, especially if I could keep it. When you look in the final analysis, why did we outsource? I think accelerated value would be the answer.